Deep inside each of us is a longing, a yearning for greatness. We want to know the world is different because we have lived. We want to make our mark. We want to be remembered for something beyond average, something great. But how do we get there? In this practical and inspiring series, we'll encourage you to take the next step on your journey towards a full, abundant life. We'll help you get connected to others, to God, and to your greater purpose through service. You can be great. You can matter. You can find the purpose and significance you are longing for. Join us for this 4-week series on the Greatness Principle.
Well, today I want to talk about being great when it comes to generosity. But first, I want to just celebrate something. Our videographer, Randy Flick, had a baby. And so today, my son Micah is being the videographer.
Hi.
So give a shout out to Randy in the comments. And he does such an amazing job. We celebrate the birth of Malcolm with you today into your family. So as we talk about generosity today, I want to take a detour first through emotions. I took an emotions class in college. It was like a intersection between philosophy department and the psychology department. We spent an entire semester studying emotions and what is an emotion. For example, just trying to describe what an emotion is a pretty significant challenge. And the professor of that class, he had a great name. He was Rob Roberts. Or Bob Roberts. Had the same first name and last name. And he had written a book about emotions that we read, and he suggested some other books about emotions. And one of the books that we read was called Descartes' Error, and it was by a guy named Antonio Damasio. And Damasio argued that emotions are entirely biologically based. It's caused by biology, it's caused by your genetics, it's based in your body, an emotion. Bob Roberts had a different definition of an emotion. For Bob, or Dr. Roberts as we called him, an emotion was a concern-based construal. And he had written a book about this. That book was called Emotions, an Essay in Aid of Moral Psychology. Doesn't that make you want to read his book? What I learned was that trying to describe emotions is so complicated. And it's hard to describe anything when it comes to human experience without some reference to nature, that is our genetics, and nurture, that is our environment. Now, back to generosity. Our nature and our nurture both work against us when it comes to being generous. Nature plus nurture equals a strong drive not to be generous to others. We want to be generous with others, but our nature, that is our instinct for self-preservation, keeps us from sharing our resources, and our nurture, that is our environment, the sort of materialistic, capitalistic society and culture that we live in, tells us to keep it all for ourselves. I think in my own life, an example is when I'm out at the grocery store shopping for the tiny pantry, that is the pantry outside of our church that people come and you can leave a little or take a little or leave a lot and take a lot. And when I'm buying something for that, I will have been spending like $200 on groceries for our family, but then I fret over spending just like 10 or 15 bucks on an item for the tiny pantry. So here's a question for you to talk about. Put your answer in the comments or turn to somebody next to you and answer this question. Where are you most likely to be generous with your financial resources, spending money on someone else? Take a minute and let's talk about that. Friends, we need a new nature and we need a new nurture. We need a new nature. We need to be reborn, born again. We need a new nurture. That is a community, an environment that will help us be generous. Paul, one of the first missionaries of the church who started churches all around the Mediterranean, wrote letters back to them. And in one of his letters to the church in Rome, he said this: "Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect." We need a rebirth in the way that we construe situations, in our attitudes, in the way that we perceive and pay attention around us. We need a new nurture that is transformed to be transformed in our very nature, in our very being of who we are. How does this rebirth happen? How does this transformation happen? Well, it's a process, but it begins by just talking to God, saying something like, "God, I know that I haven't even lived up to my own values, my own desire to be generous with my whole life and blessing others, not just with my finances, but with my time and the talents that I have. And I'm asking you right now to forgive me of that. Help me by the power of your presence with me, by your grace and your love, to be different, to follow more faithfully in the way of Jesus." That's how you do it. That's how you begin the process. And then you mark that moment with baptism in the church. Baptism is a kind of rebirth into the family of God. Or you reaffirm your baptism if you've already been baptized as an infant or earlier in life, and you say, "I want to anew commit to following Jesus in this way." Throughout this series, we've been looking at a basic principle that we call the greatness principle, that when you bless others, God blesses you. And Paul puts it this way: "Remember this, a farmer who plants only a few seeds will get a small crop, but the one who plants generously will get a generous crop. You must each decide in your own heart how much to give, and don't give reluctantly or in response to pressure, for God loves a person who gives cheerfully." What Paul's talking about here is a kind of new emotion when it comes to generosity or giving or blessing others with your finances. He says God loves a cheerful giver, and the root word for cheerful in Greek is hilarios, which is where we get our word hilarious. Have you ever been so generous that it caused you to laugh uproariously? Well, recently I had the experience of what that's like when a whole community gives generously. You see, at Sycamore Creek Eastwood campus, we have remodeled our building in all kinds of ways as both a performing arts center and an incubator kitchen. And I was there the other night when the prom performance by Peppermint Creek was rehearsing. There were like 30 people in the building rehearsing. Liz Kruger, who's the owner of Honey Bun Bakery, was there, and she was baking. And Gamblers Anonymous was there, GA. And then somebody was meeting me there to look at the building to have their birthday party there. They were going to have 120 people this birthday party. The building was so full out of our generosity of sharing it, both present and in the future, that I just found myself laughing. I found myself overfilled with joy at how our church was being generous to the community. It was the way that our church has cheerfully and generously, hilariously been generous with the community. I was kind of like a kid in a candy store, really. I was like, ooh, look at this. Ooh, look at this. And what was happening there was on full display was this value that we've lived into, especially at this campus, is that Sycamore Creek hits different. We platform artists and entrepreneurs. Or Paul goes on to describe it this way: "And God will generously provide all you need. Then you will always have everything you need and plenty left over to share with others." Now we hear again the basic idea of this greatness principle, that when you bless others, God blesses you. And I fully trust and believe that if our church blesses the community, then God will bless us back with an overfilling or overflowing abundance. Now let me make one footnote here, and we've been careful to do this through this whole series, is that when we say, if you bless others, God will bless you, we don't necessarily mean that God will bless you financially, the health and wealth gospel. What we mean sometimes is that God will bless you with a contentedness with what you have, a contentedness with less. Although I do believe that if we faithfully serve the community and meet the community's needs, that God will provide for our church. And in many ways, the way that God will provide is because people like you will give generously to what we're doing, not just at Eastwood, but across all of our campuses. Here's how the Wisdom Book of Proverbs puts it. Give me neither poverty nor riches. Give me just enough to satisfy my needs. For if I grow rich, I may deny you and say, who is the Lord? And if I am too poor, I may steal and insult God's holy name. In other words, sometimes blessing is being content with what you have, just enough. Now, the greatness principle, again, is when you bless others, God blesses you. As we're talking about the greatness principle, we can all agree on one thing that we're all great at, and we're all great at focusing on ourselves. But John, one of Jesus' closest followers, puts it this way, Jesus' way different. He says this, we know what real love is because Jesus gave up his life for us, so we also ought to give up our lives for our brothers and sisters. Jesus is the expression of ideal love, and that expression sees its fullest in Jesus in that it is self-sacrificial. If we're going to follow Jesus' way of love, then our love also will be self-sacrificial. God is love. Jesus is God. And so Jesus' way of serving and loving is our model and our example. He is the author and the perfecter of what that all means. Again, John says it this way. If someone has enough money to live well and sees a brother or sister in need but shows no compassion, how can God's love be in that person? Dear children, let's not merely say that we love each other. Let us show the truth by our actions. For us, this means a kind of self-sacrificial love, the way that Jesus loved. And not just a performative act of love, or sometimes you hear it called performative justice, where you're doing it to look good or so that you feel good about yourself. But you change the way that you live so that other people can thrive in the way that they live. This is, again, one of the ways that we describe this is that we hit different. We're focused on Jesus and justice. And so many churches are focused just on Jesus or just on justice. But Jesus means a lot to us because Jesus is God's love in the flesh. And justice means a lot to us because justice is how we express our generosity, the generosity of God's love for us through us to others around us. So here's a question for you. Where is one opportunity you have in your life right now to bless others financially? Let's talk about that. Our nature and our nurture both build up to a lack of being generous with others. One of my favorite books that I've read in the last many years is Chip and Dan Heath's book titled Switch, How to Make Change When Change is Hard. And they describe the process of changing as helping a rider on an elephant go down a path. The rider is our intellect, the elephant is our emotions, and the path is how easy the whole thing is. And if you're gonna help somebody change, you have to speak to the rider. You have to speak clearly, intellectually, about what it is that you want changed. But you have to help the rider to move the elephant, because the elephant is huge. Like, the rider can steer them only for so long. And one of the best ways to motivate the elephant is to make the path easy. You help the rider and the elephant go down the right path if you make it easy. When it comes to being generous, the rider for each of us is that, well, God loves a cheerful giver. And be transformed by the renewing of your mind, as Paul says in both places. But when it comes to the elephant, we got to help you motivate that as well. The emotions come when you construe the situation differently, when you bring a different set of values to the circumstances around you. And the path is having a community around you to help you and support you and encourage you and challenge you to go down that path together and not just by yourself. Again, here's the greatness principle. When you bless others, God blesses you. And then there's a challenge that we've been putting before you throughout this whole series. We're challenging you to look at opportunities or look for opportunities to bless people every single day. And this comes to a really unique moment for us at this time of the year. Because at this time of the year, as we head into Christmas, every year Sycamore Creek puts a challenge before each one of us to be generous. And we call that the Christmas Offering Challenge. The challenge is to give away at Christmas as much as you spend on celebrating Christmas. So if you spend $100 to buy gifts and host parties, then give away $100. If you spend $200, then give $200 away. If you spend $1,000, give $1,000 away. It's a big challenge, right? And for some of us, we have the extra finances that we can just adjust our budgets to give away as much as we spend on Christmas. But for some of the rest of us, it's kind of a self-sacrificial challenge that you have to cut your spending in half so that you have the other half to give away. So when we as a church receive this Christmas offering, we spend the whole next year giving it away. And there's 3 places that we give it away. We give it away to our care ministries, we give it away to local missions, and we give it away to global missions. Now, when it comes to our care ministries or care missions, Tom Fox, our care pastor, is covered by this offering. Tom visits people in the hospitals. He helps people with emergency needs for utility bills, and the funds for those utility bills come from this Christmas offering. Pastor Tom Fox is basically like our first responder in emergency situations. So another way that we spend this Christmas offering over the next year is in our local missions, and that means in a lot of ways supporting our local schools. For our Eastwood campus, it's our Post Oak Academy. For our South Lansing campus, it's the Mount Hope STEAM School. And at Potterville, it's, well, the whole Potterville School District. Here at Eastwood, we bought cookies for volunteer days to support the Parent-Teacher Association that's helping clean the school up. We bought some supplies for different teachers, like a rug for the new preschool teacher at Post Oak. But we don't just do missions to our local schools, we do it in a lot of different ways. We give away gas on Mardi Gras. On Maundy, Thursday, we find some way to tie washing into serving, like providing free laundry or washing cars. In the fall, some of our campuses do Pumpkin Palooza or Pumpkin Patio, where we create an urban pumpkin patch and give away 1,000 pumpkins to our neighbors. At Eastwood, we have a tiny pantry to provide for people's basic necessities, and we have a community garden that all of the food that's grown there goes to local food banks. These are just some of the local missions that we support with the Christmas offering over the next year. So the Christmas offering goes to support our care ministries, it goes to support local missions, but it also goes to support global missions. We have almost a 2-decade relationship with Dr. Mir in Nicaragua, who we have in the past done medical missions trips down with her. Although lately with the political situation in the country, we haven't been able to do those trips, but we do still provide money for her church to buy food for 40 to 50 kids every day. And in that way, we're feeding kids and families who wouldn't have meals otherwise. But we also are part of the United Methodist Church. So when we think about global missions, our supporting of missions in the United Methodist Church reaches across the entire globe in all places and all sorts of countries around our whole earth. So our Christmas offering challenge to give away as much as you spend on Christmas, that has grown from the very beginning of Sycamore Creek's history. Back at the very first year in 2001, we received $603 and we gave it all away. Fast forward many years, and in 2020, we received $31,000. And in 2021, we received $40,800, almost $41,000. And in large part, the big jump there was because there was a nonprofit in Potterville that closed, and they had about $5,000 or $6,000 left in the bank account. And they thought, who can we give this money to that it will make the greatest impact? And they thought, that Sycamore Creek in Potterville will be the best place to receive this money. Isn't that amazing? When nonprofits in your local community think that you are the best way for money to be given to the community to bless others, thank you, God. Last year in 2022, we received $33,260. $33,000 last year. That's coming out of COVID. I mean, the amazing generosity of our church. That, friends, is hilarious. Now, when you add all of it up over all of the years, Sycamore Creek has given $281,260. $281,000. That's amazing that this little church that has grown into 3 small campuses has been able to be that generous. Over $250,000. How much will we receive in 2023? Oh, I'm not sure, but I'm going to put a goal out there. I'm going to put the goal of $35,000. We've got 3 campuses. I think we can hit that. In fact, I think we could blow past it. And then imagine with me, what will God do through Sycamore Creek to be generous, to bless others generously in 2024? Only God knows. Now, I know if you're hearing this Christmas offering challenge idea for the first time, it probably feels a little overwhelming. And I want you to know that most families can't just jump right into it. There's like an onboarding that has to happen. And a lot of times you have to talk to your family and readjust expectations. And that sometimes can take years. And that's okay, because we're going to do it again next year, and the next year, and the next year. So take some step this year to take that challenge, to live into this idea that you would give away as much as you spend on Christmas. Now, here's a question for you to talk about. How does the Christmas offering challenge hit you? Let's talk. One of the classic measures of a church's effectiveness is to ask yourself this question. If your church disappeared, would anybody notice? Would the community care at all? I think it's safe to say that if Sycamore Creek ceased to exist tomorrow at any one of our campuses, the communities that we bless would most certainly notice and care. I know that because they've told me this. Several years ago, when I was the pastor at the South Lansing campus, one of the neighbors, Kelly Funk, wrote me an email. Actually, she told me in person at one of our events, and then I said, would you write this down so I can share it with the church? And here's what she said. When you, meaning Sycamore Creek Church, moved into the neighborhood, that is Scott Woods, it was clear you wanted to become a part of the neighborhood. What I so appreciate is how you have gone about doing that. There's a difference between having a church in the neighborhood and a neighborhood that happens to be a church. And to me, the latter is the more meaningful relationship. You embraced the neighborhood and you allowed the neighborhood to embrace you right back. And that's the harder part. And so you settled in and found your place and became a true part of us. And so you do not help, but you offer. You do not fix, but you give. And you offer and you give out of true generosity with no strings attached. That kind of sincerity creates space for people to embrace you back in the ways that they are able to, the ways they are most comfortable with, the ways that are meaningful to them. I can offer an example from my own life. We're not members of your church, but in many ways, I still feel as though Sycamore Creek is our church, just like Mount Hope STEAM is our school. And so I do participate with you as a neighbor. I feel very comfortable dropping in on your services from time to time, even though I'll never do more than that. But at the same time, you've made room for me to include Sycamore Creek Church in some of my ever-evolving rituals and traditions, like attending your Christmas Eve service, in order to be a part of contributing to the special collection you take up, because I know that money does good work for people where it matters most. It's my way of helping my neighborhood, and you not only allow me to do that, you welcome it. Wow. Wow. I look forward now to being at Eastwood, to getting those sorts of letters about us in the future. So friends, accept this challenge to give away as much as you spend on Christmas. Let's do it together.